Welcome to Doc's Lab and our third Master Series. Welcome to Doc's Lab and our third Master Series. I do believe this is the sixth video on production engineering and the second video on production tools. And in this video, we are going to talk about music theory, its role and importance. So first of all, before we get started, I want you to calm down. It's not going to be that bad. There's going to be two videos basically that are going to work together. This video and the next video is going to be dealing with written music, and I'm going to try to make it as painless as possible to help you become a better producer and to help you become a freer producer, because it's not supposed to be constrictive. It's to help free you and open up worlds of new possibilities. So don't get scared and just relax, and let's take a look at music theory so that we can become much better producers with a little bit of a better understanding of the foundations that we're working with our instruments. Okay, so let's talk about what music theory means to me before we get into a little bit of music theory. First of all, that I studied music theory for a long time, and I came to the understanding that I related music theory back to its most basic, fundamental structures to work from. Because with those basic fundamental structures, it allowed me to pick up my instrument, have some idea where I was going, so I could practice being fluent and proficient with my instrument, so I would get really comfortable with it. And I needed those basic foundations to do that. You know, the advanced studies were great, but most of my advanced theory and my abstract theory that we'll talk about is more geared to fall back on when I have to, into keys, say, or I'm modulating, to help me move forward and to give me ideas when I get stuck. Because basically, even something very simple, if I just start improvising or something, that I'm working from some very simple structures, and I'm just trying to work out some feelings and emotions, and where in my head trying to see something. You know, I mean, what am I feeling? I got this chord that's like, oh yeah, that is so cool. You know, and it's like, does that something like that would sound cool? Or if I'm noodling around, you know, when I'm doing something like that, and I do the same thing with chordal progressions too, that I'm not so much trying to jump into the theory. I'm using some basic foundations to help me move around, and then I'm searching around in my mind for my feelings and emotions, and you know, what do I feel? What do I think that might want to go? And I just start getting noodling around to get things rolling, to get sections and movements and transitions and breaks put together and things like that. Later on, as the production develops, the most basic rudimentary theory things will help you know that you've got a G chord and you're trying to make some harmonies to it, or you got a harmony, the vocals, yeah, you know, what kind of harmonies can I put to that? You know, yeah, is that note there, and then that harmony, the fifth or third or minor third, yeah, the minor third works so good, oh yeah, dude, you know, and those are most basic rudimentary things that you're going to, as you start putting things in rhythmical elements, as you put rhythmical elements together and things like that, the same thing, but it's mostly really basic foundations that we're going to talk about that are the biggest thing. That it's more of your instrument, you know, does that make sense? And your feelings and emotions, and you know, where is it you're feeling, you know, or you heard something. It was like something like I heard on this movie, da da da, yeah, dude, that would sound so cool in my song, or something similar to it, and you just start digging around for what that is, understand the structures, the progression, and da da, really simple stuff that's not really all that complicated to help your production get going. And to build it and construct it as you're working. And it's not, I studied heavy advanced theory. And it's not, there's all kinds of tools there. So when you get done with the basics and you've got yourself your instrument of choice, your keyboard, and your vocals, like we talked about in the last video, and have really gotten comfortable with them and fluent with them, with at least the basic stuff really well, with basic music theory, that you will see why, that if you want to get in real clinical theory, that you're going to study the Baroque period for a while, or what Handel was doing, or what Beethoven was doing, because he did this movement, or he used this timing change, or he did this thing, and you'll already understand that before you ever think you want to study it, because you'll understand this stuff, be fairly fluent, proficient on your instrument, and your keyboard, and your vocalist, and can say da-da-da-da-da, that then it will make sense why you would want to do that. Before, you're just going to get lost in it. I did for a long time, and I break down most of my stuff is very basic, so to not scare you, so that you really take the time to learn the most basic music theory, because it's going to open up worlds of possibilities to you. Chords, chord progressions, harmonies, inversions of chords, different scale movements, different borrowed chords or borrowed notes in there, modulations, simple things that are really going to help you, even with the, 3 instruments that you're focusing on, getting really proficient and fluent in them, so that you start producing and you start composing and you start actually making stuff that sounds good using the basic fundamental theory, and worrying a lot about your instrument and your heart and your soul and your mind, and your feelings, and going there. And you will find that you will really take huge steps forward as a producer. You'll have to trust me on that. And so just learn the basics we're talking about. In the next video, we're going to talk about basic written music. Learn that also, because you can see ideas on paper. You can make little notes about things that you're doing really quick, that to help you move forward. It's a different way that music can be beautiful to visualize, seeing what's going on. And it can help you work out different articulations, dynamics, where you're going, because you can visualize it and play it. You can play it and hit it, and then on paper, some kind of different, you got 2 different areas to help work out what you're trying to do. That's that theory working together with your instrument. But you'll focus more on your instrument, and your feelings and emotions and things like that, noodling around, seeing where you want to go. But it's monumental in helping you get there. And you will find it's not that much. And if you just slow down and take the time to learn the basic fundamental things, that you will find, you don't know how many musicians I know, how many composers and producers that I know that are fluent with just the most basic music theory. They're phenomenal guitarists. They're phenomenal sax players. They're unbelievably wondrous pianists and producers that are producing stuff that is unbelievably beautiful, complex, because they understand the basics really well, and they build things together to make complexities out of the basic things that they don't get confused by, because they understand they've broken it down into very simple structures to work from, to go wherever they want, to go anywhere. Does that make sense? And that's what you kind of got to get through your head, because that's what music theory means to me. It's just really basic foundations to work from, so that I can really get comfortable and fluent with my instrument and my keyboard, my vocalist, like we talked about in the last video, so I can start putting things together. And it can help me put things together so that I can build with it. They're building blocks to build, and to help me move around on my instrument comfortably and know not only the instrument, but what I'm looking at when I look at the fretboard or the keyboard. What is that theoretically? Just the most basic foundations, so I can start practicing moving around on it and making music using those basic foundations and structures. So I hope that makes it really simple, so you can understand. I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible to get you learning music theory that way, so that it is very helpful to you, and actually helpful to you, to help you become a better musician and producer. So let's take a look at music theory. Okay, so when we start talking about music theory, I have a link on my audio engineering channel to this channel that I made called Doc's Music Theory Lab. Now, when we start talking about music theory, that I'll give you a little bit of direction. In this video, there's a couple different places that, first of all, that you need to learn the very basic and rudimentary concepts of timing and rhythm. They're very simple concepts that there's some videos on this channel to help you learn that, and you can Google that. Heck, you can Google that and learn it in 15 or 20 minutes. They're very basic building blocks for you to build from. You can make huge complexities out of the basic building blocks. We'll talk more about that in the next video when we talk about written music, because it's easier to visualize it. But even on here on this channel, the biggest things that I'm concerned with is learning the basics. There's like a chromatic scale, the notes, the intervals, and degree system. This first video on teaching the guitar. And it applies to the piano also. Those are the most basic building blocks to help you build and help you work with your instrument. And then we go to looking at scales, modes, and key. The next step and the next basic building blocks we have to work with when we're working with our instruments in music productions. Then we go to cordial structures. There we talk about single notes, harmonies, triads being 3 notes, anything more of that being complex chords, and what that is. So you can keep that concept really simple in your mind. Then we talk a little bit about progressions and tonal chords, meaning a progression going from G to A. That's a small progression. Does that make sense? It could be the same thing if I'm playing melody. And tonal chords would be simple, the most basic chords that can be played inside a key when you're doing, like, say, the key of G or the key of F or G minor or whatever. Very simple concepts. Besides that, some basic rhythm elements, so you can understand the very basics, that you have one measure that's that's going 4/4. 4 quarter note, a quarter note gets 1 beat. There's 4 quarter notes to a measure. Does that make sense? Bop, 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 bop. Does that make sense? And you can make it as common. Get into some jazz stuff, you have a timing nightmare, right? I mean, that's not. But as you break it down into smaller pieces, you will learn as you look at the written music how you break it down into smaller pieces. So it's not so hard, because sometimes you get an idea in your head. I just go and you being able to write it out, it might be a little difficult at first. It'll take a little bit of time, and don't worry about it. But basically, like, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of guitar, there's 4 videos here that are on very basic music theory, and then all these other videos are on abstract theory to help you take the very basics and to fall back on them, to help you move forward, and to give you ideas, whether you're doing cordial structures and progressions or melody lines, which would be leads or rhythm or however you want to look at it, from the standpoint of the guitar. And then most of them are on that because it's your focus, your feelings and your emotions, and what you thinking you might want to go is more the focus. And when I teach it here from the perspective of the piano also, the first 8 videos are on the most basic music theory, so you can pull out your keyboard, see what you're looking at, understand the basics that I just talked about from the standpoint of the guitar, and from the standpoint of the piano, so that you can move around on it, so you can start practicing getting fluent and comfortable with the instrument. Because the more fluent and comfortable you get with the instrument, the more you'll be exploring your feelings and emotions and where you think you might want to go. Does that make sense? Which is going to be way more important in you becoming a good musician, even doing the real basics well, and a producer, because then you're going to relate it as you should, in my opinion. Does that make sense? And they're just the most rudimentary things, like I talked about with the guitar there, that you're going to be focused on. Here I made it a little more drawn out. It was the first videos I made from the standpoint of the piano. They were from my audio engineering class that a whole lot of people, they were not musical, they really didn't want to study music theory, so I was trying to break it down to the most simple foundations that I could, so that they would at least get a grasp on the most basics, and then start becoming fluent and comfortable with their instruments using those basic foundations. Other than the rhythmical elements, which I talk about a little farther up here. We talk about some notation here, and then I go into a little bit of advanced theory, which is more abstract theory, to help you look at music and written music and theory that we've talked about as something to help you. It doesn't tell you anything you can or can't do. It just tells you, it helps you, gives you foundations. It's just like if I pick up my guitar and I play a lead area, I can play whatever I want. That don't mean it's gonna sound good, right? And so if I have some, and I'm working from basic scales, and I can embellish on them, and I can change them any way I want, but at least have those foundations to start with. As an example, does that make sense? Or chords. I've got a basic major chord. I understand a basic major chord. That doesn't mean I have to play it just like that. I can play it as a triad, or a harmony, or I could play it as a seventh chord. That's kind of like a major chord, but it's seventh major, major seventh. That's a little different. You know, little things like that help you. You would be surprised how much it will help. And those are just some simple, really simple examples. But you'll run into tons of simple examples like that, because I found most people that I tried to teach music theory, 3 of them wanted to become mathematician, theoretician on music theory, that kind of individual. The rest of them, 97% of or 96% of them, wanted to learn these basic fundamentals like I'm talking about here, the basic rhythmical elements that they need to worry about to do rhythm, and then they just started experimenting and started becoming fluent and proficient with their instruments and became phenomenal composers, producers, and musicians, because they would spend way more time working about their instrument, getting fluent and comfortable with it, fluent and comfortable with their keyboards, and singing da 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 da, and getting comfortable with it, singing da 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 da, sing, dude. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and they just sat and learned the basics and started focusing on that, and then they realized as they started to become more proficient and more comfortable and more fluent with their instruments and their vocals and their keyboard, that they would use those basic music theories to do the very simple things. They would start noodling around da 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 ba 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 ba. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Oh, yeah, dude. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, because they would start to see the relation to it. And I try to get it broke down to its most basic things, so you can focus on the music and your feelings and your emotions and where you're thinking you might want to go. And it can, the next video will be on looking at written music, and both of them work together to help you. Does that make sense? So that you can see music, visualize it theoretically when you need to, and understand the basic components, and then worry about the other side of you become a good fluent musician, and producer with at least the basics well. Because I've talked to you about, you don't know how many productions I've heard that everybody in that band was doing fairly simple things that weren't that complicated, and the production sounded phenomenal. The drummer was keeping it simple, the bass player was keeping it simple, the guitarist was keeping it simple, the vocalist was keeping it simple, the keyboardist was keeping it simple, but everybody did what they were doing fluently and well. Does that make sense? And the production come out sounding phenomenal. Does that make sense? And it wasn't like they were like sitting around and talking about what Hannibal was doing in the forest. Sometimes I guess you get there, you might, but it was the basics that they mastered, and then worked on mastering their instruments and their keyboards and their vocals, and just not being scared of it. Sing, bro. Play with feelings and emotions. Play your keyboard, start moving around after you understand the basic foundations. Worry about that way more. The theory won't scare you nowhere near as much, because it's not the theory I'm pushing. That what I'm trying to push is the other things, but the theory are the basic foundations, so you just wander around aimlessly on your instrument, have no idea about a scale or a chord, or what a progression is, what a tonal chord is, what a harmony is, what basic rhythmical elements are, just the serious basic things. And then I talk about a lot of abstract theory to help you utilize that in the way you would like to use it. Does that make sense? And go wherever you want, but try to really free you from being constricted by the fear of theory and the fear of your instrument, and get practicing and become a pretty good instrumentalist and become a great producer. So that's my 2 cents on music theory. And you can look at my channel. There's plenty of places to learn music theory. I've got pieces of software, like there's a piece of software here called Guitar Layers to help visualize my music theory. I've got another piece of software from Musician 5 to help visualize my music theory, and it relates basic music theory and things like that I use to teach students. There's plenty of things like that. Be careful. Not everybody on the planet should be teaching music. I'm sorry. I think that everybody should sing, but not everybody should be teaching music theory, so be careful. Talk to somebody you trust that you don't think is an idiot. Does that make sense? And spend a little money on some software to help you visualize. Like my Guitar Layers, I love this piece of software because this piece of software helps me visualize my theory in so many ways from the standpoint of the guitar. It helps me visualize intervals, scales, different modes, chords, arpeggios, tonal chords, progressions, all kinds of things. I love this piece of software. There's all kinds of software to help you. Shop around. Don't just jump into anything. Don't jump into any lessons. Don't jump into any software. Investigate it. Ask questions. Ask professionals. Ask me. I kind of resemble a professional. Just kidding. But you know what I'm saying? You take your time like you're going to see 3 doctors, because it's that important. Those basic foundations, you mastering that, being happy with it, not get scared of it, and getting comfortable, is going to improve you as a musician and as a producer thousands of percentage. Does that make sense? I mean, it's going to knock you out of the ballpark. It will shine on you one morning. You're going to wake up with that, and you're just going to go, damn, bro. Oh, yeah, I got it. Let's roll. You will. That's what it did to me. One morning I woke up and I was like, I got it. And then I got out my bass and my piano, my keyboard, my vocals, and I was like, yeah, dude, I was going. You have no idea how I was happy, how I was when I realized the basic foundations and the most simple things are the biggest things I need to worry about. And then my feelings and emotions, and my abstract theory, meaning I can go anywhere. But it means options to help catch you when you fall, to help you move forward, and ideas to get you motivated and things like that. Those abstract theory concepts, like I talk about here, are much more important. And so, there's things that I talk about here, like resolve. There's all kinds of things that are a little complicated, but they're not that hard. If you just spend a little bit of time with it. But it's the most basics that I try to get you to learn first, like the first 4 videos here on this guitar and the first 8 videos here on piano, and then start feeling around your emotions, start practicing your instrument, improvising, making up little songs, and getting proficient at using it, your dynamics, and you're being tasteful, and you're moving around comfortably, and da-da-da. So you're at least proficient, comfortable, and fluent with the basic theory, and comfortable and fluent and with your instrument, to where it sounds tasteful, it sounds accurate, and it sounds good. So when you play a simple chord progression, it's done well, even if it doesn't sound like Bach and Beethoven, which I love that stuff. So, I mean, it's okay if you get into it, but it's not unnecessary all the time for a really good production. And you can do a whole lot of stuff really slowly with MIDI, 1 note at a time, if you understand a basic scale. And the basic notes and the progression you're working on, and the harmonies and the structures you're talking about with the cordial structures and the rhythm elements, da-da-da-da. So off you go. So I hope that makes that very simple. That's my recommendation and my 2 cents on the theory. Learn the basics that I'm talking about and focus on your instruments. Your instrument of choice, your vocals. Sing, bro. Yeah! Don't be scared of your voice, bro. Don't be scared of your instrument. Don't be scared of your keyboard. Take those very basic elements, start getting proficient, fluent, and comfortable with them so you can start producing. You will improve as a musician or a producer an unbelievable amount. You will have to trust me on that. Okay, so there's one last thing I want to talk about with music theory, and that is expression. When we talk about our feelings and our emotions and where to want to go, that it's a huge part of it. On this channel here, I talk about a lot when I'm talking about abstract theory. But you can watch like this video right here on Guitar Lesson 34, primary focuses, bends, vibrato, and expressing yourself. And this breaks down to things like articulations and, things like that, expression. So expressive elements of your instruments, and dynamic textures, hitting things softer or louder, or, growing in volume and things like that are huge theoretical components that you're going to want to practice them. It's like with my guitars that I get so many people that want to learn guitar. And I try to tell them, like in this video here, some of their primary focus, they need to focus on the very basics and then being able to do bends well. Doing them accurately, vibrato, slides, doing them tastefully. There's all kinds of different expressive elements and articulations that will help you, and they're different with different instruments that you really want to take some time studying some and practicing. We talked about your three basic instruments, your instrument of choice, your piano, and your vocals, and really work on the expressive elements. It's not just that basic music theory and those rhythmical elements. Those expressive elements are huge, because even something very simple that I have this little lead thing that goes, how I do that and the expression I use, the slides, the vibratos, the bends coming down, they're little pinch harmonics, there's tons of different articulations and things like that to help you with expression with all different instruments. And you really need to take those into consideration. Practicing doing them really well and fluently and being comfortable with them so your stuff comes out sounding tasteful. It sounds like a mouthful, but it really isn't. Take your time, have patience, do it properly, and spend the time working on your expressive elements infused with the basic theory I'm talking about. With those two parts being done, that you will find that you, like I said before, you as a producer and you as an instrumentalist will improve 100%, if not 200 to 300%. And it's the basics, like I talked in this video, basic bends and vibrato and slides and things like that from the standpoint of the guitar, picking or just simple things. There's lots of them. You Google it, you come up with all kinds of articulations and expressive things you can do with your instrument that are going to add life to it, and do it well, because even a simple thing, something like that, that's just a really simple melody line with a guitarist that's done really simple chords together, it's going to come out sounding good. You don't have to play like Flash all the time. It's just really simple, making your instrument cry and sing and expressing yourself and using the expressive elements, and the articulations that you can use of that instrument well. Does that make sense? And you will find that with the things that I've talked about so far, if you spend your time there and really spend the time doing those things well, and most of it, if it's pretty simple, you will find that your productions become very good, with the basic elements we're talking about. So spend your time there with your theory. And you will find you take those basic elements, you add the expressive element to it, take your time, do it well, do it tastefully, do it fluently, and be comfortable with it, and be comfortable with your instruments, your vocal, your instrument of choice, and your piano. And you're going to see in a very short period of time why I tell you that. Because you'll start putting together even simple productions, but doing them well. Does that make sense? Being comfortable with your instrument, using some expressive elements, doing it tastefully, doing it accurately, doing it fluently, and you'll be surprised, that how much better your productions become. And as you do that, you'll start experimenting with that. You'll start making the simple things more complex. You'll start, branching out, and branching out in your abilities. But don't think you have to be a virtuoso instrumentalist to be a good producer. Instrumentalists and virtuosos have their place. Does that make sense? So I do not dissuade you from that, but most productions you find that those people and the productions you really like, most of those people are not virtuosos. And if they are, most of the stuff that you really like isn't a really good show of their virtuosity, right? Because it's some very simple things a lot of times that catch people's ear. It's real simple melody lines that are really got a really nice hook to it, or chord progressions done well and tastefully and done accurately and fluently that catch the listener, that makes them want to listen to that song over and over and over and over and over again. Done well with some expression, that's done tastefully, accurately, and fluently, but the simple things well. So watch that video, you get a little bit better understanding that. Apply that to any instrument, and you'll be well on your way to mastering the basic elements that I think you should with your instrument and your music theory to make you a fairly good producer. And as you progress with that, as you become better at utilizing it, you will become a better and better and better producer with good foundations to work from. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on our Master Series 3 and becoming a production engineer, and I will see you in the next video.